1987, June 12th. 18-year-old Maya Brennan stood trembling in a borrowed wedding dress, about to marry a dirt-poor farmer she'd only met twice, a man her desperate family had chosen to save themselves from ruin. But when Thomas locked the bedroom door on their wedding night, what he did next would shatter every assumption she had about this arranged marriage. Would this stranger become her greatest nightmare, or the most unexpected blessing of her entire life? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The summer heat of 1987 pressed down on the small farming town of Mill Ridge, Nebraska, like a heavy blanket. Maya Brennan sat on the edge of her childhood bed, staring at the simple white dress hanging on her closet door. A dress borrowed from her cousin Rachel, because her family couldn't afford to buy one. At 18 years old, most girls her age were planning college visits or summer road trips with friends. Maya was getting married in 3 hours to a man she'd met exactly twice. Her hands trembled as she traced the worn floral pattern on her bedspread, the same bedspread she'd slept under since she was 7. Through the thin walls of their cramped rental house, she could hear her mother Catherine crying softly in the kitchen, the sound mixing with her father's harsh, defeated voice. "It's done, Kathy. The papers are signed. She'll have a roof over her head, and that's more than we can give her now." David Brennan had been a factory supervisor for 23 years before the plant closed down 6 months ago. The entire town had been built around that factory. When it died, Mill Ridge began dying too. Her father had searched desperately for work, but at 52 with no college degree, every door had slammed in his face. The bank was foreclosing on their house in 2 weeks. Her younger brother Jake, only 14, needed medicine for his asthma that they could no longer afford. Maya understood the math. One less mouth to feed. One daughter provided for, a small payment from the groom's family that would buy them another month, maybe 2. She had met Thomas Whitfield for the first time 4 weeks ago. Her father had driven her out to the Whitfield farm, 15 miles outside of town, on a dusty road that seemed to lead to nowhere. The farmhouse was small and weathered, the paint peeling in long strips, surrounded by 40 acres of struggling cornfields. Thomas had stood on the porch in worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt, his work boots caked with dried mud. He was 26, tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and calloused hands. His sandy brown hair was too long, falling into his hazel eyes that watched her with an expression she couldn't read. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost apologetic. "Miss Brennan, thank you for coming." The conversation had been awkward and brief. Thomas showed them the house. 3 small bedrooms, a kitchen with outdated appliances, a living room with furniture that had seen better decades. He explained that he farmed the land alone since his father had passed 2 years ago. His mother had moved to Arizona for her health. The farm barely turned a profit, but it was his, paid off, and it provided enough to live on. "I'm not offering much," Thomas had said, looking directly at her father, not at Maya. "But she'd have a home. She'd be safe. I'd make sure of that. Safe." The word had hung in the air like a promise or a threat. Maya hadn't been sure which. The second meeting had been even shorter. Thomas had driven into town in his battered pickup truck to finalize the arrangements with her parents. He'd brought a small bouquet of wildflowers, black-eyed Susans and purple coneflowers, and handed them awkwardly to Maya. "These grow wild on the property," he'd said. "Thought you might like them." She'd taken the flowers, mumbled a thank you, and escaped to her room. That night, she'd pressed one of the flowers between the pages of her diary, though she couldn't explain why. Now, sitting in her childhood bedroom for the last time, Maya tried to remember everything she knew about Thomas Whitfield. He was quiet. He was poor. He lived alone on a failing farm. He needed a wife for reasons she could only guess at. Someone to cook and clean, maybe. Someone to help with the endless work. Someone to fill the silence of that isolated farmhouse. Her best friend Jessica had cried when Maya told her about the arrangement. "This is insane, Maya. This is like something from 100 years ago. You can't just marry some random farmer because your dad lost his job." But Jessica's father owned the hardware store in town. Jessica had a college fund. Jessica had options. Maya had a borrowed dress and 3 hours. A soft knock on her door made her look up. Her mother entered, her eyes red and swollen. Catherine Brennan was only 43, but the last 6 months had aged her a decade. She sat beside Maya and took her daughter's hand. "Baby, I'm so sorry," Catherine whispered. "If there was any other way." "I know, Mom." Maya squeezed her mother's hand, trying to be brave. "It's okay. Thomas seems like a decent man. Your father asked around. People say he's honest, hard-working. He doesn't drink, doesn't gamble." "That's something," Maya nodded, though the words felt hollow. Decent, honest, hard-working. These were the qualities you'd list for a business partner, not a husband. What about love? What about romance? What about all the dreams she'd had since she was a little girl, watching fairy tales and imagining her own happy ending? "He'll expect—" Catherine paused, struggling with the words. "On your wedding night, he'll expect certain things. As his wife, you'll have duties." Maya felt her cheeks burn. Her mother had attempted the talk several times over the years, each attempt more uncomfortable than the last. Maya had learned more from health class and whispered conversations with friends than from her mother's vague euphemisms. "I understand," Maya said quietly, though her stomach churned with anxiety. Catherine pulled her daughter into a fierce hug. "You're so brave, so much braver than I ever was." 2 hours later, Maya stood in the tiny ceremony room at Millridge's only church. There were no decorations, no flowers beyond the simple bouquet Thomas had given her that morning, more wildflowers from his farm. The guest list was painfully small. Her parents, her brother Jake, Thomas's uncle Henry, who'd driven in from Iowa, and Pastor Williams, who was performing the ceremony. Thomas stood at the makeshift altar in a suit that was too big for him, clearly borrowed. He'd shaved and combed his hair, but he still looked uncomfortable, like a man dressed for someone else's life. When Maya walked down the short aisle on her father's arm, Thomas's expression shifted, something that might have been guilt or regret flickering across his features. The ceremony lasted 12 minutes. Pastor Williams rushed through the traditional vows with the awkward energy of someone who knew this wasn't a love match, but was being paid to pretend otherwise. When he instructed Thomas to kiss his bride, Thomas leaned in and pressed a brief, chaste kiss to Maya's lips. His mouth was warm and dry, and he pulled away quickly, as if he'd touched something forbidden. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Pastor Williams announced to the nearly empty room. There was no reception. Her mother had packed Maya's belongings, 2 suitcases of clothes, a box of books, a few photographs, and loaded them into Thomas's truck. There were tearful goodbyes. Jake clung to his sister, crying that he didn't want her to go. Her father shook Thomas's hand and said, "You take care of her," in a voice that carried both a request and a warning. And then Maya was sitting in the passenger seat of the pickup truck, watching her family grow smaller in the side mirror as Thomas drove them away from everything she'd ever known. The drive to the farm was silent. Thomas kept his eyes on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel. Maya stared out the window at the passing landscape. Cornfields and scattered houses, the occasional barn, the endless Nebraska sky. She wanted to say something, anything, to break the suffocating quiet, but words failed her. What do you say to the stranger you just married? When they finally turned onto the long dirt driveway leading to the farmhouse, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Thomas parked the truck and sat there for a moment, not moving. "Maya," he said finally, her name sounding strange in his voice. "I know this isn't what you wanted." She didn't reply. What could she say? "I'll bring your things inside," he continued. "The bedroom at the end of the hall, that's ours now. I'll give you some time to settle in." He climbed out of the truck and began unloading her suitcases. Maya followed slowly, her legs stiff from sitting, her heart pounding. The farmhouse looked even more isolated than she remembered, surrounded by darkening fields, the nearest neighbor miles away. Inside, the house smelled of dust and old wood. Thomas carried her belongings to the bedroom. A small room with a double bed covered in a plain quilt, a dresser with a cracked mirror, and a window that overlooked the backyard. He set her suitcases down and turned to face her. "I'll make us some dinner," he said. "You must be hungry." Maya wasn't hungry. She felt sick, but she nodded anyway. Thomas left her alone in the bedroom, closing the door softly behind him. Maya sat on the edge of the bed and looked around at her new reality. This room, this house, this farm, this was her life now. She was married. She was 18 years old and married to a poor farmer she didn't know. And tonight he would come to this bedroom and expect things from her that she'd only read about in stolen romance novels and health textbooks. Her hands shook as she opened her suitcase and began putting her clothes in the empty dresser drawers. She could hear Thomas moving around in the kitchen, the sound of pots and pans, water running, the mundane sounds of domestic life. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As darkness fell completely outside the window, Maya changed into the simple nightgown her mother had packed for her. It was white cotton, modest, nothing like the lacy negligées she'd seen in department store catalogs. She braided her long brown hair and sat on the bed, waiting for her husband to come claim what was now legally his. The clock on the dresser ticked past 9 o'clock. Maya sat rigid on the bed, her heart hammering against her ribs as footsteps approached down the hallway. The bedroom door opened slowly, and Thomas stood in the doorway, still wearing his dress pants, but he'd changed into a plain white undershirt. In his hands, he carried a tray with 2 plates of food. "You never came out for dinner," he said quietly. "Figured you might eat something here." He set the tray on the dresser. Simple fare, scrambled eggs and toast, a glass of milk. Not a wedding feast by any stretch, but the gesture caught Maya off guard. She'd expected him to be more demanding, more assertive. Instead, he seemed almost as uncomfortable as she was. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas nodded and stood there awkwardly, his hands shoved in his pockets. The silence stretched between them, heavy with expectation and dread. Maya's pulse raced. This was it. This was the moment where everything would change, where this stranger would become her husband in every sense of the word. But Thomas didn't move toward the bed. Instead, he walked to the window and looked out at the dark fields beyond. "I need to tell you something," he said, his back still turned to her. "And I need you to listen before you say anything." Maya's throat tightened. Whatever was coming, his tone suggested it wasn't what she'd been expecting. Thomas took a deep breath. "I didn't marry you for the reasons you probably think. I don't need a cook or a housekeeper. I've been managing fine on my own for 2 years. He turned to face her then, and in the dim lamplight his expression was earnest, almost pained. "I married you to save you." The words hung in the air, making no sense. "What?" "Your father came to me 6 weeks ago before you even knew about any of this. He was desperate. The bank was threatening foreclosure. Your brother needed medicine, and he'd heard that I had some money saved. He asked if I'd consider an arrangement." Thomas's jaw tightened. "He offered you like you were property he could sell to the highest bidder." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. She'd known her father was desperate, but hearing it stated so bluntly made her stomach turn. "I told him no at first," Thomas continued. "Told him that wasn't right, that you deserved better than to be bartered away. But then he told me about Martin Voss." The name sent ice through Maya's veins. Martin Voss was a 62-year-old cattle rancher who lived 20 miles north. He was wealthy by Millridge standards, but his reputation was dark. His first wife had died under mysterious circumstances. His second wife had left him and disappeared. Rumors swirled around town about his temper, his drinking, his treatment of women. "Voss had offered your father 3 times what I could pay," Thomas said, his voice hardening. 3 times. "And your father was considering it because he was that desperate." When I heard that, I knew I had to do something. Maya's hands clutched the quilt. "So you married me to keep me away from Martin Voss." "I married you to give you a choice." Thomas moved closer but stopped several feet from the bed, maintaining distance. Your father was going to sell you to someone. At least with me, you'd be safe. At least with me, you'd have time to figure out what you really want. What do I want? Maya's voice cracked. I'm already married to you. What choice do I have now? Every choice. Thomas reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to Maya carefully, as if it were made of glass. This is a letter I wrote before the wedding. It states that our marriage was never consummated, that we're seeking an annulment on the grounds that the union was coerced. I've already signed it and had it notarized. Maya unfolded the paper with shaking hands. The legal language was formal and precise, but the meaning was clear. Thomas had given her an escape route. I don't understand, she whispered. Why would you do this? Thomas sat down on the floor, his back against the far wall, putting as much distance between them as the small room allowed. My mother was forced into marriage when she was 17. My grandfather arranged it because my father's family had land and money. She spent 25 years in a loveless marriage, trapped, miserable. When my father died, she told me she felt guilty for being relieved. He looked down at his hands. I swore I'd never do that to another person. Never trap someone in a life they didn't choose. Maya stared at this man, her husband, who had just upended everything she thought she knew about her situation. So what happens now? Now you have options, Thomas said. Option 1, you stay here as my wife in name only. We have separate bedrooms. You help around the farm if you want to or you don't. I won't touch you. Won't make any demands. In 6 months or a year, when you've figured out what you want to do with your life, we file for annulment. You walk away free. And Option 2, we file the annulment papers tomorrow. I drive you back to your family, or I help you get to wherever you want to go. I'll give you the money I would have paid your father, enough to get you started somewhere new. Lincoln, Omaha, wherever. You could take classes, get a job, start fresh. Maya's mind reeled. My family needs that money. My brother needs his medicine. I'll make sure your brother gets his medicine either way, Thomas said firmly. That's not negotiable. I won't have a sick kid suffering because of adult problems. Tears burned Maya's eyes. This didn't make sense. People didn't do things like this. Men didn't give up power once they had it. There had to be a catch, some hidden price she'd have to pay. Why? She asked, her voice breaking. Why would you spend your money, marry a stranger, just to help me? What do you get out of this? Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Peace of mind, I guess. Knowing I didn't become the kind of man my mother feared she'd raised. He met her eyes. And maybe, if I'm being completely honest, hoping that someday you might choose to stay. Not because you have to, but because you want to. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Maya saw him then, really saw him. Not as the farmer who'd bought her, not as the stranger she'd been forced to marry, but as a man who'd sacrificed his own comfort and money to give her freedom she hadn't even known to ask for. I need time, Maya said finally, to think about all this. Take all the time you need. Thomas stood up slowly. I'll sleep on the couch tonight. The second bedroom is full of farm equipment right now, but I'll clear it out tomorrow. He moved toward the door, then paused. Maya, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Sorry this happened to you. Sorry you were put in this position. You deserved better. After he left, Maya sat in the quiet bedroom, holding the annulment letter in trembling hands. Through the closed door, she could hear Thomas moving around the house, the creak of the couch springs as he settled in, the click of the lamp being turned off. She looked at the untouched food on the dresser, at her suitcases still half unpacked, at the wedding ring on her finger that felt both foreign and strangely significant. Everything she'd believed about this day, about this marriage, about Thomas Whitfield, had been wrong. He hadn't claimed her, hadn't demanded his rights as a husband. Instead, he'd offered her something she thought she'd lost forever: agency. The power to choose her own path. Maya set the letter on the nightstand and finally ate the now cold eggs and toast. They were bland but edible, prepared by a man who lived alone and cooked for function rather than pleasure. As she chewed, she tried to process everything that had happened. Option 1 meant staying here, living a lie but buying herself time. Option 2 meant freedom, but stepping into an unknown future with no safety net beyond Thomas's charity. Neither option was what she'd imagined for her life. But then again, nothing about the past 6 months had been what she'd imagined. At least now she had choices, even if they were complicated ones. Through the window, she could see stars scattered across the clear Nebraska sky, brighter than they ever appeared in town. The farm was isolated, yes, but there was something peaceful about the silence, something honest about the darkness. Maya changed into her nightgown and climbed under the quilt. The bed was lumpy but clean, the sheets smelling faintly of line-dried cotton and fresh air. She turned off the lamp and lay in the darkness, listening to the house settle around her. Somewhere in the living room, Thomas Whitfield, her husband who wasn't really her husband, was sleeping on a couch that was too short for his tall frame. He'd given up his bed, his comfort, his wedding night, all to honor a promise to a mother who'd suffered and a principle he refused to compromise. Maya didn't know what tomorrow would bring, didn't know what decision she'd make about her future. But for the first time since her father had told her about the arrangement, she felt something other than fear and resignation. She felt the stirring of something unexpected, hope. Maya woke to unfamiliar sounds, the distant crow of a rooster, the rustle of wind through cornstalks, the creak of old wood settling. For a disoriented moment she couldn't place where she was. Then memory crashed back. The wedding, Thomas's revelation, the annulment papers on the nightstand. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, telling her it was well past dawn. She grabbed her watch from the dresser, 8:47 a.m. She'd slept nearly 11 hours, exhaustion finally claiming her after weeks of anxiety and sleepless nights. The house was quiet, too quiet. Maya dressed quickly in jeans and a simple t-shirt, then ventured out into the hallway. The living room couch showed evidence of Thomas's night there, a pillow, a folded blanket, but he was nowhere to be seen. The kitchen was empty too, though there was a fresh pot of coffee on the counter and a note written in neat handwriting, gone to check the irrigation system. Coffee's fresh. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. Maya poured herself a cup and explored the kitchen properly for the first time. The cabinets were sparse, basic staples like flour, sugar, canned goods. The refrigerator held eggs, milk, cheese, some wilted vegetables. This was the kitchen of someone who ate to survive, not someone who enjoyed cooking. She found herself washing the dishes in the sink, Thomas's dinner plate from last night, a coffee mug, a frying pan. It was something to do, a way to occupy her hands while her mind spun. What was she supposed to do now? Just exist in this strange limbo, waiting to decide her future. The thought of going back to her parents' house felt impossible. They'd already lost their home by now, probably moved into her aunt's cramped apartment across town. There was no room for her there, and besides, returning would mean admitting defeat, forcing her family to return Thomas's money, but staying here meant living with a man she barely knew, accepting his charity, pretending to be his wife when they both knew it was a facade. The back door opened, and Thomas stepped inside, his boots muddy, his shirt already damp with sweat despite the early hour. He stopped short when he saw her at the sink. "You're up," he said, stating the obvious. "I didn't want to wake you." "You didn't." Maya dried her hands on a dish towel. "The note said to help myself, so I made coffee. I meant food, too. There's not much, but—" He gestured vaguely at the cabinets. Another awkward silence fell between them. Thomas cleared his throat. "I'm going to town this afternoon. Need to pick up some supplies. Figured I'd stop by the pharmacy, make sure your brother's prescription gets filled." The casual mention of Jake made Maya's chest tighten. "You don't have to do that. I said I would." Thomas moved to the sink to wash his hands. "I keep my promises." Maya stepped aside, giving him space. Up close, she could see the weariness in his face, the dark circles under his eyes. The couch clearly hadn't provided much rest. "You should take the bedroom tonight," she said impulsively. "It's your house. I can sleep on the couch." "No." Thomas's response was immediate and firm. "You're not sleeping on the couch. I'll clear out the second bedroom today. Should have done it before the wedding, but I ran out of time. I could help, Maya offered, surprising herself. With clearing it out, I mean. Thomas looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. You don't owe me anything, Maya. You don't have to work to earn your keep here. I know, but I can't just sit around doing nothing. I'll go crazy. She met his eyes. Please, let me help. After a moment, Thomas nodded. All right. Finish your coffee first. It's going to be dusty work. The second bedroom was worse than Maya had imagined. Boxes of old farm equipment, broken tools, stacks of agricultural magazines dating back to the 1970s, rusted metal parts whose original purpose was anyone's guess. Everything was coated in a thick layer of dust. They worked side by side, hauling boxes to the barn, sorting through items to determine what could be salvaged or sold and what needed to be thrown away. Thomas was quiet, methodical in his work. Maya found herself watching him when she thought he wasn't looking, the way his forearms flexed when he lifted heavy boxes, the concentration on his face as he examined old equipment, the unconscious habit he had of pushing his hair out of his eyes. Your mother really moved to Arizona? Maya asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had developed. Tucson. 3 years ago, right after Dad died. Thomas set down a box of rusted bolts. She has arthritis. The dry heat helps. Plus she wanted to get away from this place. Too many bad memories. Do you talk to her? Every Sunday. She calls at 6 o'clock like clockwork. He paused. She doesn't know about you yet. About the wedding. Maya absorbed this. Are you going to tell her? Eventually. When I figure out how to explain it. Thomas gave her a wry smile. Not sure how to tell your mother you entered into a marriage of convenience to save a girl from being sold to a predator. The bluntness of the statement should have stung, but Maya appreciated his honesty. What do you think she'd say? Thomas considered this. Probably that I'm too much like her, can't stand seeing people trapped in situations they didn't choose. She'd understand, I think. Might be proud even. They continued working, falling into an easy rhythm. Maya learned that Thomas had studied agricultural science for 2 years at a community college before his father's health declined and he'd had to return home to run the farm. He'd hoped to modernize the operation, implement new irrigation techniques, maybe diversify crops. But money was always tight, and the farm demanded immediate attention over long-term improvements. What about you? Thomas asked as they took a break, sitting on the porch with glasses of water. What did you want to do? Before all this? Maya hesitated. It felt strange to talk about dreams that now seemed impossibly distant. I wanted to teach. Elementary school, maybe 3rd or 4th grade. I loved helping my brother with his homework, watching things click when he finally understood something. You could still do that. Would require a college degree. That costs money I don't have. The university in Lincoln has a teaching program. If you decided to stay here for a while, you could take classes. It's about an hour's drive, but manageable. Maya looked at him sharply. You'd pay for college? I'd help. If you wanted. Thomas stared out at his fields. The farm doesn't make much, but I've got savings. My dad was careful with money, left me a decent amount. It should be used for something meaningful. Why are you doing this? Maya's voice came out softer than she intended. Really? There has to be more to it than just helping a stranger. Thomas was quiet for so long, Maya thought he wouldn't answer. Then, you ever feel like you're living the wrong life? Like somewhere along the way you took a turn that led you away from who you were supposed to be? Maya thought about her own detours, dropping out of community college when her father lost his job, working double shifts at the diner to help pay bills, watching her friends move forward while she stood still. Yes, I feel that way about this farm sometimes. I love the land, love the work, but it's lonely. It's isolating. My dad ran this place with an iron fist, refused to modernize, refused to change. When he died, I inherited not just the property, but his way of doing things, his stubbornness, his isolation. Thomas turned to look at her. Maybe I thought that having someone here, someone who chose to be here, not someone obligated, might help me figure out how to make this place feel less like a prison. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and raw. Maya saw past the stoic farmer exterior to the man underneath, someone just as trapped as she was, just in a different kind of cage. "I haven't decided yet," Maya said carefully, "about staying or going. I need more time. Take all the time you need." Thomas stood, brushing dust off his jeans. "Come on, let's finish that bedroom. I'm tired of the couch." They worked through lunch, stopping only when Thomas's stomach growled so loudly that Maya laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd had in weeks. Thomas looked startled by the sound, then smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "I'll make sandwiches," Maya offered. "Unless you were planning something elaborate." "My cooking skills begin and end with scrambled eggs." "Sandwiches sound perfect." In the kitchen, as Maya assembled ham and cheese sandwiches with the limited ingredients available, she felt something shift inside her. This wasn't the life she'd planned. Thomas wasn't the husband she'd dreamed of as a girl, but there was honesty here, a strange kind of freedom in knowing exactly where she stood. No illusions, no false romance. Just two people trying to navigate an impossible situation with as much dignity as they could muster. Through the window, she could see the fields stretching toward the horizon, golden in the afternoon sun. It wasn't beautiful in any conventional sense, just corn and dirt and endless sky. But there was something compelling about its simplicity, its straightforward nature. Thomas joined her in the kitchen, and they ate their sandwiches standing at the counter, too tired to bother with plates. He told her about the irrigation problem he'd discovered that morning, explaining the mechanics in a way that suggested he didn't expect her to understand, but didn't mind sharing anyway. Maya found herself asking questions, genuinely curious about how the farm operated, about the rhythms of agricultural life she'd never considered before. When they finished eating, Thomas grabbed his truck keys. "I'm heading to town now. Anything you need besides your brother's medicine?" Maya thought about it. "Could you pick up some groceries? I'd like to cook a real dinner tonight." "If that's okay," Thomas's expression softened. "That'd be nice. Make a list of what you want. I'll get it." As she wrote out ingredients, chicken, fresh vegetables, rice, spices, Maya realized she'd made a decision, even if only a temporary one. She wasn't ready to leave yet. Not because she had to stay, but because something about this strange arrangement, this unexpected honesty, made her want to see where it might lead. 3 weeks passed in a strange rhythm that Maya had never experienced before. She woke each morning to the sound of Thomas already at work, spent her days exploring the property, reading books from the dusty collection in the living room, and cooking meals that grew progressively more ambitious as Thomas kept bringing home groceries without complaint. The second bedroom had been transformed into a modest space with a single bed. A lamp and curtains Maya had sewn from fabric Thomas bought in town. He slept there now, though Maya noticed he was often up before dawn and rarely went to bed before midnight. The farm demanded constant attention, broken fences, equipment maintenance, the endless cycle of watering, weeding, monitoring. Maya had called home twice. The first time, her mother cried with relief hearing her voice, confirming that Thomas had indeed paid for Jake's medication and had given them additional money that bought them 2 more months in a rental house. The second call her father had answered, his voice gruff with shame, unable to form the apology that hung between every stilted word. She hadn't called Martin Voss's name into the conversation, but it sat there like a third presence on the line. Her father had been willing to hand her over to that man. The knowledge created a distance she wasn't sure could ever be bridged. On this particular Tuesday morning, Maya was in the kitchen experimenting with a pie recipe when she heard an unfamiliar vehicle coming up the drive. Through the window, she watched a silver sedan park next to Thomas's truck. A woman emerged, mid-50s, well-dressed in clothes too formal for farm country. With steel-grey hair cut in a sharp bob, the woman knocked firmly on the door. Maya wiped her flour-covered hands on her apron and answered, "Can I help you?" The woman's eyes swept over Maya with cool assessment. "I'm looking for Thomas Whitfield. I'm Eleanor Hastings from the County Social Services Office." Maya's stomach dropped. "He's out in the Northfield." "I can get him." "And you are?" Maya Whitfield." The name still felt foreign on her tongue. Eleanor's eyebrows raised slightly. I see, I wasn't aware Thomas had married. That's actually why I'm here. She pulled out a folder from her briefcase. May I come in? Maya led her to the kitchen table, her mind racing. Social services. Why would they be here? Had someone reported the marriage? Did they know it was an arrangement? Eleanor sat down and opened her folder. Mrs. Whitfield, I'll be direct. We received an anonymous tip 3 days ago claiming that Thomas Whitfield entered into a financial arrangement involving a minor, specifically that he paid your family for marriage rights to you. These are serious allegations. The blood drained from Maya's face. I'm 18. I'm not a minor. Yes, our records confirm that. However, the nature of the arrangement itself raises questions about coercion and potential human trafficking concerns. Eleanor's voice was professional, but not unkind. I need to ask you some questions, and I need honest answers. Are you here of your own free will? Yes, Maya said immediately. Has Thomas Whitfield ever hurt you, threatened you, or forced you to do anything against your will? No, never. Are you aware that you have rights? That if you're in an unsafe situation, we can help you? Maya thought about the annulment papers still tucked in her nightstand drawer, about Thomas sleeping on the couch that first night, about his offer to drive her anywhere she wanted to go. I'm aware, and I'm safe here. Eleanor studied her carefully. Maya, I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've seen every kind of domestic situation imaginable. I've heard women defend their abusers, protect their captors. I need you to understand that whatever story you've been told to tell me, whatever threats have been made, there are no threats. Maya met her eyes steadily. Thomas married me to keep me safe from a man who would have hurt me. He's given me nothing but kindness and options. Options like what? Maya hesitated. Revealing too much might cause more problems, but something about Eleanor's directness made her want to tell the truth. He offered me an annulment, gave me legal paperwork, said I could stay or go, whatever I chose. He's never touched me, never demanded anything. We sleep in separate bedrooms. Eleanor's expression shifted slightly, surprise breaking through her professional mask. Do you have these annulment papers? Yes, in my room. May I see them? Maya retrieved the document, her hands trembling slightly. Eleanor read through it carefully, her frown deepening. This is legitimate, she said finally. Notarized, properly executed. He really gave you an out. He meant it, Maya said quietly. Everything he's done has been about giving me choices. Before Eleanor could respond, the back door opened and Thomas walked in, stopping short when he saw the stranger at his kitchen table. His eyes immediately went to Maya, checking if she was okay, before turning to Eleanor. Can I help you? Eleanor stood, extending her hand. Eleanor Hastings, County Social Services. We need to talk, Mr. Whitfield. Thomas's jaw tightened, but he shook her hand. About your marriage, the circumstances surrounding it, and whether it violates several state and federal laws regarding human trafficking and coercion. Thomas's face went pale, but he didn't flinch. I'll answer any questions you have. But Maya had nothing to do with any of this. Whatever legal trouble comes from this, it's on me, not her. Sit down, Mr. Whitfield. Eleanor's voice carried authority. Let's start from the beginning. For the next hour, Thomas explained everything. David Brennan's desperation, Martin Voss's offer, Thomas's decision to intervene, the arrangement of the marriage, the annulment papers. He left nothing out, even the parts that made him look calculated or foolish. Eleanor listened, taking notes, her expression unreadable. When Thomas finished, she sat back in her chair. This is the strangest case I've ever handled, she admitted. Technically, what you did skirts several legal gray areas. Paying someone's debts in exchange for marriage could be construed as purchasing a person. However, she tapped the annulment papers. The fact that you immediately provided legal exit documentation, that you've made no demands of your wife, that she's here of her own free will, it complicates things. What happens now? Thomas asked. I need to file a report. There will be an investigation. You'll likely need to speak with law enforcement about David Brennan's actions and Martin Voss's offer. Eleanor looked between them. I have to ask, why go through all this? There were other ways to help Maya without marrying her. Thomas was quiet for a moment. No, there weren't. Her father was going to marry her off to someone. At least this way, she had a say in what came next. And you, Maya? Eleanor turned to her. Now that you've been here 3 weeks, knowing you could leave any time, why stay? Maya hadn't expected the question, and the answer caught in her throat. Why had she stayed? The easy answer was that she had nowhere else to go. But that wasn't entirely true anymore. Thomas had given her money. She could rent an apartment, find work, start over, because he kept his promises, Maya said finally. Because for the first time in months, I felt like someone saw me as a person worth protecting, rather than a burden to offload. Because this strange arrangement is more honest than anything I've experienced in my entire life. Eleanor's expression softened marginally. I'm going to recommend that this case be monitored, but not immediately prosecuted. However, Mr. Whitfield, you need to understand how dangerous this was. If Maya had been 17 instead of 18, if you hadn't provided that annulment documentation, if anything about this situation had been even slightly different, you'd be facing serious criminal charges. I know, Thomas said quietly. I thought about all of that. Did it anyway. Reckless heroism is still reckless. Eleanor packed up her briefcase. I'll be back in 30 days to check on the situation. In the meantime, I suggest you both think carefully about your next steps. This arrangement can't continue indefinitely in this legal limbo. After Eleanor left, silence filled the kitchen. Thomas sat with his head in his hands, the weight of potential legal consequences clearly crushing him. Maya stood by the counter, her pie forgotten. I'm sorry, Thomas said without looking up. I thought I was helping, but I've made everything more complicated. If you want to file those annulment papers now, I'll understand. Might actually be better, legally speaking. Maya moved to sit across from him. Do you want me to file them? Thomas finally looked at her, his hazel eyes tired but honest. I want you to do whatever makes you happy. That's all I've ever wanted. That's not what I asked. He took a deep breath. No, I don't want you to file them. These past 3 weeks, having someone to cook dinner with, to talk to share this space with, it's been the best 3 weeks I've had in years. But what I want doesn't matter. What matters is what's right for you. Maya thought about the annulment papers, about Eleanor's visit, about the choice that kept circling back to her like a persistent bird. She could leave. She should leave, probably. This whole situation was bizarre and complicated and potentially illegal. But when she thought about leaving, about going back to a world where she'd been seen as disposable, where her own father had been willing to sell her to a monster, she couldn't imagine it. What if I want to stay? She asked softly. Not because I have to, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I choose to? Thomas's expression flickered with hope before he shuttered it. Then you stay, for as long as you want, even if it complicates the legal situation. Even then, Maya stood and returned to her pie, resuming the work of crimping the edges. Good, because this is the first place I've felt like myself in months, and I'm not ready to give that up. Behind her, she heard Thomas release a breath he'd been holding. Neither of them spoke about what this decision might mean, about how their arrangement was shifting into something neither had planned for. But in the quiet kitchen, with flour on her hands and sunshine streaming through the windows, Maya felt something she hadn't felt since before her father lost his job. She felt like she belonged somewhere. The investigation that Eleanor Hastings initiated brought unexpected consequences. 2 days after her visit, a sheriff's deputy arrived to take statements from both Maya and Thomas. A week later, David Brennan was questioned about his attempted arrangement with Martin Voss. The town of Millridge, already struggling and gossip-hungry, erupted with speculation. Maya learned about the rumors when she ventured into town alone for the first time since the wedding. She needed fabric for new kitchen curtains and had convinced Thomas she'd be fine making the trip herself. But the moment she walked into Henderson's general store, conversations died mid-sentence. Women she'd known her entire life suddenly found their shopping fascinating. Mrs. Patterson, who'd taught her Sunday school, crossed to the other side of the aisle. At the checkout counter, The teenage cashier, a girl named Brittany who'd been 2 grades behind Maya in school, rang up her purchases with barely concealed curiosity. "So it's true. You really married that Whitfield farmer?" Maya kept her voice level. "Yes. People are saying your dad sold you to him, that it was some kind of weird arrangement. People say a lot of things." Brittany leaned closer, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Is he like holding you hostage out there? Because Jenny Morrison's mom works at the courthouse, and she said there's an investigation about human trafficking." Maya met the girl's eyes with steel in her own. "Thomas Whitfield is the kindest man I've ever met. Anyone who says otherwise doesn't know what they're talking about." She grabbed her bags and walked out, her cheeks burning. But as she loaded the fabric into Thomas's truck, she realized something. She'd meant every word. Somewhere in the past month, her defense of Thomas had stopped being about maintaining appearances and started being about protecting someone she genuinely cared about. The drive back to the farm gave her time to think. The fields rolled past, touched with the first hints of autumn gold. She'd grown familiar with this route, with the landmarks, the crooked fence post 3 miles out, the abandoned barn at the turnoff, the cluster of oak trees that marked the edge of Thomas's property. When she pulled into the driveway, Thomas was replacing boards on the front porch steps. He looked up, immediately reading something in her expression. What happened? Maya told him about the store, about the stares and whispers. Thomas's jaw clenched, his hands tightening around the hammer. "I'll go talk to them. Set the record straight. Don't." Maya surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. "It won't help. People believe what they want to believe. They're treating you like a victim, like you need rescuing." "Maybe I did need rescuing," Maya said quietly. "Just not from you." Thomas set down the hammer and sat on the porch steps. Maya joined him, their shoulders almost touching. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard. "I talked to my mother yesterday," Thomas said after a moment. "Told her everything. About the marriage, the investigation, all of it. What did she say?" "She laughed." Thomas shook his head with a rueful smile. "Said I was an idiot and a hero in equal measure. Then she asked if she could meet you." Maya's heart stuttered. "Meet me? She's planning to visit next month. Said she needs to see for herself what kind of woman would agree to this crazy situation." Thomas glanced at her sideways. "I told her you were remarkable. She said that's exactly what worried her, that I'd fallen for someone who might not fall back." The admission hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Maya's pulse quickened. They'd been living in this strange, suspended state, neither married nor strangers, neither committed nor free. But something had been shifting, building like storm clouds on the horizon. "Thomas," Maya started, then stopped, unsure how to put words to what she was feeling. He waited, patient as always, giving her space to gather her thoughts. When Eleanor asked me why I stayed, I gave her a partial answer. The truth is more complicated. Maya picked at a loose thread on her jeans. "I've spent my whole life being told what to do, where to go, who to be. My parents, teachers, even friends, everyone had expectations. Then my dad's situation made me feel like I had no value beyond being a transaction. A problem to solve." Thomas's expression darkened, but he didn't interrupt. "But here, you've never once told me what to do. You've given me choices, trusted me to make my own decisions, treated me like my thoughts and feelings matter." She turned to look at him fully. "You've given me something I've never had before, respect." "Maya, I'm not finished." She took a breath. "I know this started as a rescue mission, a good deed to ease your conscience about your mother's past. But it's become something else for me. This place, this life we're building, it feels real. And I need to know if it feels real to you too, or if I'm just a project you'll eventually complete and move on from." Thomas was quiet for so long that Maya's courage nearly failed. Then he reached out and took her hand. The first time he'd initiated physical contact since their wedding day kiss. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and steady. "Every morning I wake up and hear you moving around in the kitchen," he said. "Every evening I come in from the fields and smell whatever you're cooking. Every night, we sit at dinner and talk about our days, and for those hours, this house feels like a home instead of just a place I sleep." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "You're not a project, Maya. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years, and I'm terrified every single day that you'll realize you deserve better than a struggling farmer with legal troubles and a failing corn crop." Maya's throat tightened with emotion. What if I don't want better? What if I just want this? Then we figure out what this means, Thomas said. Together. The word together resonated through Maya like a bell. She realized they were still holding hands, still sitting close enough that she could see gold flecks in his hazel eyes, could count the freckles the sun had brought out across his nose. "I think we should tear up the annulment papers," she said. Thomas's breath caught. "Are you sure?" "Once they're gone, I'm sure." Maya squeezed his hand. "I don't want an escape route anymore. I want to be here, really here, as your actual wife, not just someone hiding behind legal loopholes. Maya, if we do this, people will talk even more. The investigation will get more complicated. My family made their choices. Now I'm making mine." She met his eyes. "Unless you don't want," Thomas kissed her. It wasn't like the obligatory peck at their wedding. This kiss was real, tentative at first, then deeper as Maya responded. His hand came up to cup her face, gentle despite his calloused palm. Maya's fingers curled into his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for 3 weeks, he admitted. "Only 3 weeks. Okay. Maybe since the day I first saw you on this porch, looking terrified and brave at the same time." Maya laughed, the sound bright in the quiet afternoon. "Why didn't you?" "Because you needed to choose this, choose me. Without pressure, without obligation." Thomas pulled back enough to look at her properly. "I meant what I said about giving you freedom. That had to be real. It was real." "Is real." Maya stood, pulling him up with her. "Come on. Let's go burn those papers." They walked into the house hand in hand. Maya retrieved the annulment documents from her nightstand drawer. Papers she'd read dozens of times over the past month, both as a safety net and as proof of Thomas's integrity. Now they represented something she no longer needed, an exit from a life she'd decided to embrace. Thomas built a small fire in the fireplace, even though it was too warm for one. Together, they fed the pages to the flames, watching the legal language curl and blacken and disappear. "No going back now," Thomas said softly. "I don't want to go back." Maya leaned into his side, and his arm came around her shoulders naturally, as if it had always belonged there. "I want to move forward." That night, they cooked dinner together for the first time, Thomas chopping vegetables with unpracticed precision, while Maya seasoned chicken and told him about her idea to plant a vegetable garden in the spring. They ate at the small kitchen table, their feet touching underneath, conversation flowing easily. After dinner, Thomas showed her the farm's account books, explaining the finances without sugarcoating the challenges. The corn prices were down. Equipment needed replacing. The irrigation system required expensive upgrades. But he had plans, strategies, hopes for making the farm more profitable. "I was thinking about diversifying," he said, pointing to notes he'd made in the margins. "Maybe add a few cows, try organic farming methods, possibly set up a farm stand for local produce. But I'd need help. Can't do it alone." Maya studied the numbers, the plans, seeing not just columns of figures, but a future being sketched out. "What if I enrolled in those agricultural business courses at the community college? I could learn the business side, help with marketing, finances." Thomas looked up, hope and surprise mingling in his expression. "You'd want to do that?" "I want to build something," Maya said. "With you. Something that's ours." The word ours settled between them like a promise. Thomas reached across the table and took her hand again. And Maya realized this simple gesture, holding hands with her husband, felt more intimate and meaningful than any grand romantic gesture could have. Later, as they said goodnight in the hallway between their separate bedrooms, Thomas hesitated. "We don't have to rush anything," he said. "Just because we burned the papers doesn't mean we have to change how we're living." We can take this as slow as you need. Maya appreciated the consideration, the continued respect for her autonomy. But she also felt the pull between them, the building attraction that had been simmering beneath the surface of their careful politeness. "I know," she said, "and I appreciate that. But Thomas, I'm tired of living in separate rooms, pretending this marriage isn't real." His eyes darkened with understanding and desire. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying good night," Maya said, stepping closer. "But I'm also saying that I'd like you to kiss me again. And maybe tomorrow we can talk about making this marriage real in every sense." Thomas cupped her face in both hands and kissed her thoroughly, a kiss that promised patience and passion in equal measure. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling. "Tomorrow," Thomas agreed, his voice rough. "We'll talk tomorrow." Maya went to her room that night, but for the first time since arriving at the farm, she didn't feel alone. She felt chosen and chosen, wanted and wanting. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but full of possibility, and for the first time in her life, she couldn't wait to see what came next. October arrived with unseasonable warmth, followed by predictions of an early frost that could devastate what remained of the corn harvest. Thomas spent increasingly long hours in the fields, racing against the weather forecast, his face etched with worry lines that aged him beyond his 26 years. Maya had enrolled in 2 courses at the community college, Introduction to Agricultural Business and Basic Accounting. The hour-long drive to Lincoln twice a week gave her time to think, to process how dramatically her life had transformed in just 6 weeks. She was no longer the frightened girl who'd been married off to save her family. She was Thomas's partner, learning the intricacies of farm management so she could help build their future. Their relationship had deepened slowly, deliberately. True to his word, Thomas never pushed, never demanded. But the separate bedrooms had become a formality they both recognized as temporary. They'd fallen into evening routines, sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Thomas's arm around her shoulders, stealing kisses that grew progressively less innocent. On the first Wednesday of October, Maya returned from class to find an unfamiliar car parked in the driveway, a Mercedes sedan that looked absurdly out of place against the weathered farmhouse. Her stomach knotted with apprehension as she recognized the vehicle. Martin Voss stood on the porch, his thick frame blocking the door, his silver hair slicked back with too much pomade. At 62, he carried himself with the arrogance of wealth and entitlement. When he saw Maya, his lips curved into a smile that made her skin crawl. "Well, well, the little bride returns." His voice was smooth, practiced. "I was just explaining to your husband that we have some unfinished business to discuss." Thomas appeared in the doorway behind Voss, his expression thunderous. "There's no business between us, Voss. I've asked you to leave. Now. No need for hostility." Voss descended the porch steps, moving uncomfortably close to Maya. She held her ground, refusing to show fear. "I simply came to make a generous offer. You see, I've heard through certain channels that your arrangement with young Maya here might be under legal scrutiny. Seems the county has questions about the nature of your marriage." "That's none of your concern," Thomas said, moving to stand beside Maya. "But it is." Voss's eyes raked over Maya in a way that made her want to shower. "You see, I had an agreement with David Brennan first. He came to me before he ever approached you. I offered him $15,000 for his daughter's hand in marriage." $15,000, Whitfield. 3 times what you paid." Maya's blood ran cold. 15,000. Her father had valued her at $15,000. Your point? Thomas's voice was dangerously quiet. "My point is that the agreement was broken when Brennan accepted your inferior offer. I've consulted with my attorneys, and they believe I have grounds for a lawsuit, breach of contract, interference with business relations, possibly even fraud." Voss pulled out a business card and held it toward Maya. "However, I'm a reasonable man. I'm willing to forget the whole matter if Maya comes to her senses and accepts my original proposal. It's not too late to correct this mistake. Get off my property." Thomas stepped forward, his fists clenched. Voss ignored him, keeping his attention on Maya. Think about it, sweetheart. A real house, not this falling-down shack. Financial security. You'd never have to worry about money again. All you'd have to do is be my wife. A much easier life than breaking your back on a failing farm. Something inside Maya snapped. All the fear she'd carried for weeks, all the rage at being treated like property, all the humiliation of having her worth calculated in dollar amounts. It erupted. You want to know why I'd choose this falling-down shack over your mansion? Her voice shook with fury, not fear. Because Thomas sees me as a person, not a possession. Because he's never once looked at me the way you're looking at me now, like I'm something to be owned and used. Because I'd rather spend every day of my life working alongside a good man than one single hour trapped with a predator like you. Voss's expression hardened, the veneer of civility cracking. Careful, girl. You're speaking to a man with considerable influence in this county. One word from me and your husband's legal troubles multiply. The investigation into your marriage could take a very uncomfortable turn. Is that a threat? Thomas moved between Maya and Voss. It's a reality check. Voss straightened his expensive suit jacket. You have 1 week to reconsider. After that, I file the lawsuit. And trust me, Whitfield, you don't have the resources to fight me in court. You'll lose this farm, your reputation, possibly your freedom. All because you couldn't leave well enough alone. He walked to his Mercedes, paused with his hand on the door. Maya, when you realize what defending this foolish man will cost you, my offer remains open. And like some people, I'm a man of my word. The sedan kicked up dust as it retreated down the driveway. Maya stood trembling, Thomas's hand on her shoulder the only thing keeping her grounded. He can't do this, Maya whispered. Can he? Thomas's jaw worked. I don't know. Maybe. He's got money, connections. He turned to face her, his eyes filled with a pain that cut deeper than any threat Voss could make. Maya, if you want to take his offer, don't. Maya grabbed his shirt fierce. Don't you dare suggest I'd ever consider that. I meant every word I said to him. But if he sues, if he ties us up in court, costs money we don't have, then we'll figure it out. Together. Remember. She pulled him close, feeling his heart racing against hers. I'm not going anywhere, Thomas Whitfield. Not for $15,000? Not for $15 million. You're stuck with me. Thomas buried his face in her hair, his arms tight around her. I've brought nothing but trouble into your life. You've brought me life, period. Maya pulled back enough to look at him. Before you, I was just existing, waiting for someone else to decide my fate. Now I'm actually living, making choices, building something that's worth fighting for. They stood holding each other as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Finally, Thomas released her and headed inside. I need to call my lawyer. See what our options are. The conversation lasted over an hour. Maya sat at the kitchen table, listening to Thomas explain the situation, hearing him say yes and I understand in increasingly grim tones. When he finally hung up, his expression told her everything she needed to know. Voss has a case, Thomas said flatly. Not a strong one, but strong enough to drag us through court for months, maybe years. Legal fees alone could bankrupt the farm. What about the annulment papers we burned? Could we claim the marriage was never real? We burned the evidence that would have protected us. Thomas ran his hands through his hair. God, I was so focused on making grand romantic gestures, I didn't think about the legal implications. Maya stood and moved to him, taking his face in her hands. Stop, we made that decision together. No regrets. Maya, I could lose everything. The farm, my freedom if Voss's lawyers spin this right, then we don't fight this alone. An idea was forming in Maya's mind, crystallizing into certainty. We tell the truth. All of it publicly. Thomas frowned. What do you mean? Eleanor Hastings is coming back next week for her follow-up visit. What if we gave her everything? Documented evidence of Voss's original offer to my father, testimony about what he really wanted. Proof that our marriage, strange as it is, was about protecting me from someone dangerous. Maya's words came faster as the plan solidified. We turn the narrative around. Make it about his predatory behavior, not your intervention. That's risky. We'd be putting your family's actions under scrutiny. My father made his choices. He can face the consequences. Maya's voice hardened. I won't let Voss use shame and secrecy as weapons. If we expose what he is publicly, he loses his power. Thomas searched her eyes. You're sure? Once we go public with this, there's no taking it back. Everyone will know what your father tried to do, I'm sure. Maya had never been more certain of anything. I'm done being silent, done being treated like a shameful secret. Our marriage might have started unconventionally, but it's real now, and I'm ready to fight for it. Over the next 3 days, they prepared their counterattack. Maya contacted Eleanor Hastings and requested an emergency meeting. Thomas tracked down every piece of documentation, bank records showing the payment to Maya's father, the original deed agreement, even a recorded voicemail from David Brennan mentioning Voss's competing offer. The hardest part was Maya calling her mother to warn her what was coming. Catherine Brennan listened in silence as Maya explained their plan, then began to cry. Your father will deny everything, Catherine said. You know he will. Then he's a coward and a liar, Maya replied, surprised by how steady her voice remained. Mom, I love you, but I can't protect Dad from the consequences of trying to sell his daughter to a predator. I won't. I know, baby, I know, Catherine's voice broke. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. You've got more courage than I ever did. Eleanor Hastings arrived on the scheduled Friday, but this time she wasn't alone. She brought a representative from the State Attorney General's office, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in human trafficking cases. For 3 hours, Maya and Thomas laid out everything. Patricia took extensive notes, her expression growing increasingly grave as the scope of Voss's behavior became clear. This isn't the first time his name has crossed my desk, Patricia admitted. We've had suspicions about his marriages, the circumstances surrounding them. But victims have been too afraid to come forward, and without testimony our hands were tied. So what happens now? Thomas asked. Patricia exchanged a look with Eleanor. Now we investigate Martin Voss thoroughly. And while that's happening, I'd suggest you two prepare for things to get worse before they get better. Voss won't take kindly to being challenged. She was right. 2 days later, Voss's lawsuit was filed. But the same day, the State Attorney General's office announced an investigation into allegations of coercive marriage practices in the county. No names were mentioned, but the timing was clear. That evening, as Maya and Thomas sat on the porch, watching darkness fall, he took her hand. Last chance to run, he said, half joking. Things are about to get very complicated. Maya laced her fingers through his. I'm not running. I'm right where I choose to be. Thomas pulled her close, and they sat in silence as the first stars appeared overhead. Somewhere in the distance, storm clouds were gathering. But for now, at this moment, they had each other, and sometimes that was enough. The lawsuit hit the local newspapers 3 days later. Not the big Lincoln papers, but the Millridge Gazette ran it as front-page news. Local rancher sues farmer over marriage contract dispute. The article was carefully worded to avoid libel, but the implications were clear enough that Maya's phone started ringing before breakfast. She ignored the first 5 calls. The 6th was from her brother Jake. Maya, his 14-year-old voice cracked with worry. Are you okay? Dad's losing it. He's saying you're going to testify against him in court. Maya's heart clenched. Whatever anger she felt toward her father, Jake was innocent in all this. I'm fine, Jake, I promise. How are you? How's your asthma? Better since we got the new medicine. But Maya, Dad's talking about calling you, trying to convince you to drop this whole thing. He says Voss is dangerous, that you're making a huge mistake. Jake, listen to me. Maya kept her voice gentle but firm. What Dad tried to do was wrong. He knows it was wrong, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen just to make things easier for him. There was a long pause. Voss came by the house yesterday. Maya's blood ran cold. What? He talked to Dad for like an hour. I couldn't hear everything, but Dad was yelling afterward. Mom was crying. It was bad, Maya. Did Voss threaten you? Any of you? Not exactly. But he kept saying things like unfortunate consequences and people getting hurt. Jake's voice dropped to a whisper. I'm scared, Maya, not for me, but for you. What if he does something? He won't. The state is investigating him now. He can't afford to make things worse. Maya hoped she sounded more confident than she felt. Jake, do me a favor. If Voss comes around again, call me immediately, and stay away from him. After hanging up, Maya found Thomas in the barn, repairing a broken harness with methodical precision. She told him about Jake's call, about Voss visiting her family. Thomas's expression darkened. He's trying to intimidate them into pressuring you. Classic manipulation tactic. He set down the leather straps. Maybe we should get you out of here for a while. You could stay with my mother in Arizona until this blows over. No. Maya's response was immediate. I'm not hiding. That's exactly what he wants. Maya, if he's willing to go after your family, then we document it. We tell Patricia Chen. We build the case against him. She moved closer, taking Thomas's grease-stained hands in hers. I know you want to protect me, but I'm done being protected. I want to fight. Thomas studied her face, and something in his expression shifted, respect mixing with concern. You've changed since you got here. You know that. Is that a bad thing? It's extraordinary. He pulled her into his arms, and Maya rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I just don't want you to get hurt. Too late for that. I've been hurt, but now I'm angry, and anger is much more useful than fear. That afternoon, they drove together to meet with Patricia Chen in Lincoln. The Attorney General's office was imposing, all marble floors and official portraits. Patricia met them in a conference room lined with law books. We've uncovered some interesting information about Martin Voss, Patricia began, spreading documents across the table. His second wife, Diane Voss, didn't just disappear. We tracked her down to a women's shelter in Colorado. She's agreed to give testimony about the abuse she suffered during their marriage. Maya leaned forward. Will that help our case? It establishes a pattern of predatory behavior toward vulnerable women. Patricia pulled out another file. We've also been looking into the circumstances of his first wife's death. The original investigation ruled it an accident. She fell down the stairs. But there were inconsistencies in Voss's statements that were never properly examined. Thomas's hand found Maya's under the table. Are you saying he might have killed his first wife? I'm saying there are questions that deserve answers. Patricia's expression was grave. But here's the problem. Reopening a death investigation from 15 years ago is complicated. We need more than suspicions. We need evidence, witnesses, something concrete. What about my father's testimony? Maya asked. He can confirm that Voss offered money for me, that there was a financial arrangement. Patricia nodded slowly. We've subpoenaed David Brennan. He'll have to testify in Voss's lawsuit against your husband. The question is whether he'll tell the truth or protect himself. He'll lie, Maya said flatly. He'll say whatever keeps him out of trouble. Maybe. Patricia tapped her pen against the table. But here's the thing about liars under oath. They tend to contradict themselves. If we can catch him in inconsistencies, we can discredit his testimony. Which brings me to why I asked you here today. She looked directly at Maya. I need you to tell me everything your father said about Voss's offer. Every detail you can remember, no matter how small. For the next hour, Maya recounted every conversation, every comment her mother had made, every hint she'd caught about the arrangement being discussed. Thomas added what he knew from his own interactions with David Brennan. Patricia recorded everything, stopping occasionally to ask clarifying questions. This is good, Patricia said finally. Very good. We're building a compelling case that Voss has a history of attempting to coerce young women into marriage through financial manipulation of their families. Combined with Diane Voss's testimony about abuse, we may have enough to not only defeat his lawsuit, but to bring criminal charges. Relief flooded through Maya. So Thomas won't lose the farm. I can't make guarantees, but Voss's legal position is weakening. Patricia gathered her files. However, I need to warn you both. Voss is a wealthy man with expensive lawyers. This fight could drag on for months. You need to be prepared for that, financially and emotionally. The drive back to the farm was quiet. Maya watched the landscape roll past, processing everything. Criminal charges against Voss, her father forced to testify. The possibility of months or years of legal battles. "What are you thinking?" Thomas asked. "That I wish I could go back and warn my 18-year-old self what she was about to walk into." Maya turned to look at him, but also that I wouldn't change it, any of it, because it led me here, to you, to this life we're building. Thomas reached over and squeezed her hand. "Even with all the legal drama and public scrutiny?" "Even with that," Maya smiled. "You know what the strangest part is? I actually feel free for the first time in my life. When I was living with my parents, I was trapped by their expectations, their financial problems, their decisions. Now, even with lawsuits and investigations, I'm making my own choices, fighting my own battles." "Our battles," Thomas corrected gently. "We're in this together." The word "together" had become their touchstone, the foundation of everything they were building. Maya squeezed his hand back, and they drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence. Back at the farm, there was a message on the answering machine. Maya pressed play and heard her mother's voice, trembling and urgent. "Maya, it's Mom. Your father wants to meet with you." "Just you, not Thomas. He says he needs to talk to you before the deposition next week." "Please, baby. I know you're angry with him, but he's your father. He's not doing well. Just one conversation. That's all he's asking." Maya stared at the machine, emotions warring inside her. Part of her wanted to delete the message and pretend she'd never heard it. But another part, the part that remembered her father before the factory closed, before desperation turned him into someone she barely recognized, that part wondered if maybe, just maybe, he deserved one more chance. "You don't have to go," Thomas said quietly. "You don't owe him anything." "I know." Maya took a deep breath. "But I think I need to. Not for him, for me. I need to look him in the eye and hear what he has to say. Otherwise I'll always wonder." Thomas nodded, understanding, even if he didn't like it. "Then I'm driving you. I'll wait outside, but I'm not letting you go alone." The next morning, they drove to the small rental house where Maya's family now lived. Thomas parked on the street, engine running. "I'll be right here. If you need me, for any reason, I'm 30 seconds away." Maya kissed him quickly. "Thank you." "For understanding." Her father answered the door before she could knock. David Brennan looked like he'd aged a decade in 2 months. His hair had gone almost completely grey, his face gaunt, his eyes haunted. "Maya." His voice cracked on her name. "Thank you for coming." They sat in the cramped living room, an uncomfortable distance between them on the worn couch. Her mother hovered in the doorway until David waved her away. "I'm not going to make excuses," David began. "What I did, what I tried to do, it was unforgivable." "I know that." Maya waited, offering nothing. This was his meeting. He could fill the silence. When the factory closed, when I couldn't find work, when I saw Jake struggling to breathe without his medicine, I felt like I was drowning, like I was failing at the one job I had, providing for my family. He looked at his hands. "Voss approached me first, offered 15,000, said he was looking for a young wife, someone to take care of his house. Made it sound almost respectable." "It wasn't respectable," Maya said quietly. "It was selling your daughter." "I know." David's voice broke. "God help me, I know. But I convinced myself it was a solution. That you'd be taken care of, that Jake would get his medicine, that we'd survive. I didn't let myself think about what it would mean for you. Did you know about his previous wives? About the abuse?" David's silence was answer enough. "You knew," Maya breathed. "You knew what kind of man he was, and you were going to send me to him anyway. I didn't want to believe the rumors. I told myself they were exaggerated." "Stop!" Maya stood, anger flooding through her. "Don't lie to me, not now. You knew exactly what you were doing. You chose to save yourself at my expense." "You're right." David looked up at her, tears streaming down his weathered face. "You're absolutely right. I chose wrong. I chose money over my daughter's safety, my own desperation over your future, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." Maya wanted to walk out, wanted to leave him with his guilt and regrets, but something kept her rooted to the spot. "Why did you agree to meet with Thomas instead? If Voss offered so much more?" "Your mother." David wiped his eyes. "She found out about the arrangement with Voss. She threatened to leave me, take Jake, tell everyone what I was planning. She said if I went through with it, she'd never forgive me. So when Whitfield showed up with his offer, Catherine insisted I take it. Said at least he seemed decent, so her mother had tried to protect her in the only way she could. Maya filed that information away to process later. The deposition is next week, Maya said. What are you going to say? David met her eyes. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell the truth, all of it. About Voss's offer, about what he wanted, about why you chose Thomas's arrangement instead. That would incriminate me. I could face charges, then face them. Maya's voice was steel. You made these choices. Now deal with the consequences. But, Dad, if you lie under oath to protect Voss, if you throw Thomas under the bus to save yourself, you'll lose me forever. Not just in the legal sense, in every sense. I'll be done. David stared at her, seeing perhaps for the first time the woman his daughter had become, strong, unbending, unwilling to be manipulated. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I'll tell the truth. Maya nodded and walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the knob. For what it's worth, I don't hate you. I just don't know if I can ever trust you again. She left before he could respond, walking out into the sunshine where Thomas waited. He took one look at her face and opened his arms. Maya walked into them, letting his strength anchor her. How did it go? He asked. He's going to tell the truth. Or at least he says he will. Maya pulled back to look at him. Either way, I'm done carrying his shame. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Thomas kissed her forehead. Together, he agreed. As they drove away from her childhood home, Maya didn't look back. The past was behind her. The future, uncertain, complicated but hers to choose, waited ahead. The deposition took place in a sterile conference room in downtown Lincoln. Fluorescent lights humming overhead. Maya sat beside Thomas, their hands clasped under the table, as Martin Voss's attorney, a sharp-suited man named Gerald Pierce, prepared to question David Brennan. Her father looked diminished in the formal setting, wearing a borrowed suit that hung loose on his frame. He avoided Maya's eyes as he was sworn in, his hand trembling slightly as he placed it on the Bible. Patricia Chen sat across from them, a quiet presence with a legal pad full of notes. This deposition was technically for Voss's lawsuit against Thomas, but everyone in the room knew it was about much more than breach of contract. Pierce began with softball questions, David's employment history, his financial situation, the timeline of events. David answered mechanically, his voice flat. Then Pierce moved in for what he clearly thought was the kill. Mr. Brennan, did you or did you not have a prior agreement with my client, Martin Voss, regarding your daughter's marriage? David's eyes finally flickered to Maya. She held his gaze, steady and unwavering. Yes, David said quietly. I did, Pierce smiled, sensing victory. And can you describe the terms of that agreement? Voss offered me $15,000 if I would arrange for my daughter Maya to marry him. He said he was looking for a young wife who would be compliant, who wouldn't ask questions or cause trouble. Pierce's smile faltered. That's not, Mr. Brennan, you're mischaracterizing. He showed me pictures of his previous wives, David continued, his voice gaining strength. Told me they'd been difficult, but that he was sure Maya would be different. Said she looked like the type who knew how to keep her mouth shut. Voss leaned forward, hissing something at his attorney. Pierce held up a hand. Mr. Brennan, my client denies these allegations. I don't care what he denies. You asked me what happened, and I'm telling you. David turned to look directly at Voss. You wanted to buy my daughter like she was livestock. And I was desperate enough, broken enough, that I almost let you. Mr. Brennan, Patricia interjected smoothly. What changed your mind? My wife, Catherine, found the paperwork, confronted me. She said she'd leave me, take our son, tell everyone what kind of man I really was if I went through with it. Then Thomas Whitfield showed up. Pierce shuffled his papers, trying to regain control. And Mr. Whitfield offered you money as well, correct? $5,000 to help with our immediate bills and my son's medical expenses. David's voice was steady now. But he also gave me something Voss never did, his word that Maya would be safe, that she'd have choices, that he wouldn't force her into anything. How convenient, Pierce said sarcastically. And you expect us to believe that Mr. Whitfield, a struggling farmer, married a teenage girl out of pure altruism? I believe it because I've seen how he treats her. David finally looked at Maya fully. I've seen my daughter transform from a scared girl into a confident woman. I've watched her choose to fight rather than run. That doesn't happen when someone's being abused or controlled. That happens when someone's finally free. Maya felt tears prickling her eyes. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement, truth, something to build on. Pierce tried several more angles, attempting to paint Thomas as equally manipulative, but David didn't budge. He admitted his own wrongdoing, took responsibility for his actions, and refused to implicate Thomas in anything beyond trying to help. When the deposition finally ended, Voss stormed out without a word, his attorney scrambling after him. Patricia gathered her materials with a satisfied expression. That went better than expected, she said. Your father's testimony seriously undermines Voss's lawsuit, and it gives us additional ammunition for the criminal investigation. Outside the building, David waited by his car. Maya approached slowly, Thomas a supportive presence at her side. Thank you, Maya said simply. For telling the truth, David nodded, his eyes red. It's the least I could do. The very least. He paused, struggling with words. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But Maya, I want you to know I'm proud of you. Proud of the woman you've become, despite everything I put you through. I didn't become this person despite what you did, Maya said carefully. I became this person because of it. Because I had to. Because the alternative was letting myself be defined by other people's choices. She reached out and briefly squeezed her father's hand, then walked away with Thomas. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was something. A door left open rather than slammed shut. The lawsuit dragged on for another 6 weeks, but the momentum had shifted. Voss's attorneys filed motion after motion, each more desperate than the last. Meanwhile, Patricia's investigation uncovered 3 more women willing to testify about Voss's predatory behavior. Women he'd pursued with offers of financial security in exchange for marriage. Women he'd intimidated into silence. In late November, as the first snow dusted the cornfields, Patricia called with news. Voss is dropping the lawsuit, she said, barely contained triumph in her voice. His attorneys advised him that continuing would only strengthen our criminal case. He's agreed to a settlement that admits no wrongdoing but withdraws all claims against you and Thomas. Maya closed her eyes, relief washing over her. And the criminal investigation? Ongoing. We have enough now to bring charges, attempted coercion, witness intimidation, possibly more depending on what we find regarding his first wife's death. Voss is going to face consequences, one way or another. After hanging up, Maya found Thomas in the barn, winterizing equipment for the season. She told him the news, and for a long moment he just stood there, wrench in hand, processing. It's over, he said finally. We won. We survived, Maya corrected. And we're stronger for it. That evening, they celebrated with a simple dinner. Roast chicken Maya had learned to make. Vegetables from the winter garden they'd planted together. Wine from a bottle Thomas had been saving. As they ate, they talked about the future. I've been thinking, Thomas said, refilling her glass, about what comes next. The farm is stable. Your classes are going well. The legal nightmare is over. We could actually start planning now instead of just reacting. What kind of planning? Thomas reached across the table and took her hand. The kind where we stop living like we're in temporary arrangement and start building something permanent. We could renovate the house, expand the farm operations, maybe start a family someday if that's something you want. Maya's heart swelled. A family? Only if you want, Thomas said quickly. No pressure. I just mean we have options now. We can choose our future instead of having it chosen for us. Maya thought about the girl she'd been just 4 months ago, terrified in a borrowed wedding dress, married to a stranger. That girl couldn't have imagined this moment, sitting in her own kitchen with the man she'd chosen to love, discussing dreams and possibilities. I want all of it, she said. The renovations, the expansion, the family. I want to build a life here that's ours. Not what my parents wanted, not what society expects, but what we choose together. Thomas stood and pulled her up into his arms. Have I told you lately that you're remarkable? Not since this morning, Maya teased. He kissed her, slow and deep, a kiss that held promises and passion and partnership. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. There's something I want to do, Thomas said. Something I should have done months ago. He disappeared into his bedroom and returned with a small velvet box. Maya's breath caught as he knelt in front of her. Maya Whitfield, we got married for all the wrong reasons. But somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you, with your strength, your courage, your refusal to be anything less than exactly who you are. He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a small diamond. I know we're already married legally, but I want to marry you again, properly this time, because I choose you, every day and every way. Will you marry me? Again? Tears streamed down Maya's face as she nodded. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Thomas slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly and kissed her again. This time, the kiss led them to the bedroom they'd been sharing for the past month, to the bed where they'd slowly learned each other, building intimacy on foundations of trust and respect. Later, wrapped in Thomas's arms, Maya stared at the ring glinting in the moonlight through the window. When should we do it? She asked. The second wedding? Whenever you want. Spring, maybe? When everything's blooming and new? Spring sounds perfect. Maya turned to face him. And this time I want my family there. All of them, including my father. Not because I've forgiven everything, but because I want them to see what we've built. I want them to understand that their mistakes didn't destroy me. They made me stronger. Thomas brushed hair from her face. What about your friends? The ones from town who've been avoiding you? Maya considered. The ones who really mattered reached out eventually. Jessica called last week, apologized for disappearing. Said she was ashamed it took her so long to be supportive. Those are the people I want there. The ones who came back matter more than the ones who never left. They talked late into the night, planning their future wedding, discussing farm improvements, dreaming about children who might someday run through these fields. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them, and they fell asleep tangled together, the ring pressing gently against Thomas's chest where Maya's hand rested. Christmas came quietly. Thomas's mother arrived from Arizona, a weathered woman with kind eyes who hugged Maya fiercely and whispered, "Thank you for making my boy smile again." They spent the holiday cooking together, sharing stories, building connections. Maya's mother visited on Christmas Eve, bringing Jake, who'd grown 2 inches and whose asthma was finally under control. The gathering was small, slightly awkward, but genuine, the first steps toward healing old wounds. In March, Patricia called with final news. Martin Voss had pleaded guilty to multiple counts of coercion and intimidation in exchange for avoiding trial on more serious charges. He would serve 5 years in prison and be permanently barred from contacting any of his victims. It's not perfect justice, Patricia admitted, but it's something. And more importantly, it's over. Maya stood in the kitchen, newly renovated with bright paint and new appliances, and felt the last weight lift from her shoulders. It was truly over. The past could finally be just that. The past. The second wedding took place in April, in the front yard of the farmhouse surrounded by wildflowers. Pastor Williams officiated again, but this time the ceremony was joyful, celebratory. Maya wore a dress she'd chosen herself, simple and elegant. Thomas wore a new suit that actually fit, his eyes never leaving his bride. When they exchanged vows they'd written themselves, there wasn't a dry eye among the small gathering of family and friends. "I promise to choose you," Maya said, her voice clear and strong, "every single day for the rest of my life. To build dreams with you, to weather storms beside you, to celebrate victories together. You gave me freedom when I had none, and I freely give you my heart." Thomas's voice was rough with emotion. "I promise to honor your choices, to support your dreams, to stand with you always. You've taught me that the strongest foundations are built on trust and respect. I love you, Maya, not because I have to, but because I choose to. Today and always, when Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss was met with cheers and applause. It was nothing like their first wedding, that awkward, desperate ceremony born of necessity. This was a celebration of choice, of love found in unexpected places, of two people who'd started as strangers and became partners. At the reception, a simple gathering in the barn decorated with fairy lights and flowers, Maya's father approached her nervously. "You look beautiful," David said. "Happy, really happy." "I am," Maya confirmed. "I know I don't deserve to be here, but thank you for letting me witness this." Maya looked at the man who'd almost destroyed her future and instead, inadvertently, gave her the greatest gift. "You're here because you told the truth when it mattered, because you chose accountability over self-preservation." "That's a start, Dad. Not an ending, but a start," David nodded, understanding that forgiveness was a journey, not a destination. As the sun set over the fields, Maya and Thomas stood together, watching their guests mingle, listening to laughter echo across the property. The farm that had once felt like a prison now felt like paradise, not because the work was easier or the challenges fewer, but because they'd chosen this life together. "No regrets?" Thomas asked, pulling her close. Maya looked up at her husband, her real husband, chosen and choosing, and smiled. "Not a single one." 6 years later, a little girl with Thomas's hazel eyes and Maya's determination chased chickens through the yard, while her younger brother toddled after her. The farm had expanded, diversified, begun to thrive. Maya had finished her degree and now taught agricultural business at the community college twice a week. Eleanor Hastings stopped by occasionally, always welcomed, checking in on the couple whose unusual case had become a cautionary tale in her training seminars. Proof that sometimes unconventional solutions led to unexpected happiness. David Brennan visited monthly, slowly rebuilding trust with the daughter he'd almost lost. Catherine had become Maya's closest confidant, a grandmother who spoiled her grandchildren and helped in the garden. And Martin Voss. He remained in prison, a warning about the cost of treating people as property, of letting greed override humanity. But in the farmhouse on the edge of Millridge, life bloomed. Two people who'd begun as a transaction had built a love story more powerful than either could have imagined. Because the best love stories aren't about perfect beginnings. They're about people who choose each other, who fight for each other, who build something beautiful from broken pieces. Maya Whitfield had been married off at 18 to a poor farmer, still innocent, terrified of what he might do on their wedding night. What he did was give her freedom, and what she did was choose to stay, to love, to build a life that was entirely, completely, beautifully hers. That was the real shock. Not what happened on the wedding night, but what happened after, when two strangers became partners, when an arrangement became a marriage, when necessity became choice. And in the end, that made all the difference. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.